Welcome everyone. So my name is Hugo Hamon. I'm the head of training at SymfonyLive in France. So I live in Paris. And my talk today is about the serializer component of Symfony, which is one of the unknown component of the framework. You probably use most of the components provided by the framework, but the serializer is one of them, which is quite unknown by the developers. So, serialization is a task you generally perform in your web application, especially nowadays with building when you build APIs like XML API or JSON APIs. So serialization is the process of converting an object state into a specific format like XML or JSON. And the idea is to also be able to revert this PHP object from the output format. So Symfony comes with the serializer components, and this serializer object has to serialize and unserialize PHP objects. So internally, this serializer component is built with normalizers. So you have normalizers objects. Normalizers convert your PHP object to arrays. So these normalizers convert your object to an array. And then the array is converted to the output format with encoders. So we have a YAML encoder, a JSON encoder, or an XML encoder. And if you want to do the contrary, so we have decoders to convert a string, so an XML string or a JSON string, into a PHP array, and then converting the PHP array to the PHP object by denormalizing this array. So this serializer object responds to an interface, which is the Serializer Interface. So in the framework, you have the Serializer Interface that contains two methods: serialize. So serialize takes the data you want to serialize, so it can be an array or it can be an object, and the format in which you want to serialize. And you have, of course, the deserialize method that converts a string, so XML or JSON string. It takes the type, so the class, the fully qualified namespace of the class you want to convert your PHP to, and then the format in which you want to convert the string. So this serializer object works with normalizers, and of course we have a normalizer interface, because if you want to extend the serializer capabilities, you will be able to create new normalizers. So the normalizer interface gives you two methods: normalize, that normalize the object, so it converts your objects to a PHP array, and the supports normalization method, which tells if this normalizer supports a specific normalization format. We also have a denormalizer interface, so with two methods: denormalize and supports denormalization. So denormalize converts an array to your PHP object, to a PHP object. And we have encoders. So we have an encoder interface. So the encoder converts a PHP array to an output format. So you have the encoder interface with the encode method. This encode method takes the PHP array you want to encode, and the format in which you want to encode, and supports encoding method, which tells if this format is supported by this encoder. And you also have decoder interface, so which does the contrary. So you have a decode method. You pass the output, so the string, XML or JSON, and it will convert this string to a PHP array. So that's the internal structure of this serializer component. If you want to use it in Symfony, so you can use the components without the full stack framework, but if you want to use the full stack framework, there's no serializer service by default. So there's no integration for the serializer components. So you have to write it by hand. So first of all, you have to register some normalizers, and by default, this component comes with a getSet method normalizer. So this normalizer will call the getter and setter method on your PHP object when normalizing it to a PHP array or when denormalizing the PHP array to your object. You have to register some encoders, so depending on which format you want to serialize to, so you can use the JSON encoder or the XML encoder, which are both built in the component. And then you just have to instantiate the serializer class, and the constructor takes the list of normalizers and the list of encoders objects. So if you want to serialize your PHP object when you have created your serializer object, you have the serialize method we saw in the Serializer interface. So you just pass your PHP object and you tell in which format you want to serialize your object. And as we are using a getSet method normalizer, this normalizer will call all getter method in your PHP object to convert your object to an XML response, an XML output. And if you use JSON encoder, you will have the JSON output. So by default, the output is like this. You have a response root node, and for each property, you will have a node that contains the value of the property. If you have nested objects, so the serializer will also convert nested objects, but there's you may encounter a problem with this implementation when you have when you have two objects that reference themselves. So you have an object that has a dependency with another object, and this other object has the same dependency with the first object. So when the normalizer will convert your object to an XML output, you will encounter an infinite loop when serializing the objects. So that's not supported by default by the component. So it's easy to use for simple objects. If you don't want to expose all your attributes, all your properties in your objects, you can ask the serializer to ignore some of your attributes. So when you create the normalizer, the getSet method normalizer, you can also specify a list, an array of property you want to ignore from serialization process. So in this example, I want to ignore the ID property and the customer property, which is, for example, an object or a string. So in my output, when I will serialize my objects, I won't have any IDs and customer nodes. If you want to unserialize the object, so if you want to do the inverse process, so you have your XML response or your JSON response. So you have to decode your XML response first. So you have to convert it to a PHP array. So data is a PHP array, and then with the denormalize method, you can convert this PHP array to an object. So when you are using XML with XML formats, the normalizer is able to recreate a PHP object. That's not the case if you are using JSON, because JSON it will work if you use the denormalize function. But if you use the unserialize method on the serializer object, you may not be able to always revert your PHP objects. So if you want to add extra feature to the serializer component, as we saw, we have interfaces, so you can extend the internal implementation of the serializer by creating new object that implements the interfaces. So by default, this component does not provide classes for serializing into YAML formats. So, for example, I want to serialize my PHP object to YAML, so I can create a YAML encoder to convert a PHP array to a YAML output. So it's just a matter of implementing the encoder interface, and so I have to implement my encode method that takes the data, so the array I want to convert. And as Symfony comes with the YAML component, I can use the YAML dumper object to convert the PHP array to a YAML output. So as you can see, the supports encoding method makes sure that we support the YAML format. If you want to revert the object, if you want to decode a YAML string and to convert it to a PHP array, you can just implement the decoder interface. So as you can see, I'm still in the same class, YAML encoder, but a YAML encoder acts as an encoder and a decoder because I'm implementing both encoder interface and decoder interface. So the decode method parses a YAML string and it converts it to a PHP array. So YAML, my YAML variable contains some YAML description, so the YAML serialized value of my object, and I want to decode this YAML string to a PHP array. Then I want to denormalize, I want to recreate the PHP object from the YAML string. So as you can see, my booking object has been unserialized, and I can call the getReference method on my object. So by default, you have this serializer component in the framework, but it's, as I said, there is no built-in service for using the serializer. You have to create the serializer, and you have to pass the normalizers and the encoders to your serializer objects. So to extend the capabilities of this serializer object, Johannes Schmidt, who is the guy behind the security extra bundle and lots of GMS bundle. So Johannes has written the GMS serializer bundle, and this GMS serializer bundle provides lots of extra features to convert your PHP object and to normalize and denormalize your PHP object. So it provides a service. It provides by default a serializer service in your Symfony application. It gives you a configuration with annotations. It allows you to tell which properties you want to expose in your serialization output. It gives you Twig helpers. It gives you lots of new annotations to configure the output. So that's what I will introduce. So this GMS serializer bundle provides a serializer service in your Symfony application. So you can install it with Composer. I didn't mention it in the slides, but of course this is ready for Composer. So once you have installed your GMS serializer bundle, you will have access to the serializer service. So you can directly get the serializer object, and you can serialize to JSON, XML, and also YAML, because by default, the GMS serializer bundle provides YAML support for serialization. And you can deserialize your PHP object from YAML, JSON, or XML. It also gives you Twig helpers. So if you want to generate views, because for example you want to generate an API, and you want to expose an XML string or a JSON string for your API, so you can basically create a Twig template, and then you will be able to convert any PHP object directly from Twig. So you have a serialize filter provided by the GMS serializer bundle. So by default, if you just call serialize, it will use JSON as the default format, and you can pass the format you want to serialize to as the parameter of the serialize filter. So remember that when I showed you the serialization process, the output contained a response root node. By default, you can't configure this root node, but thanks to the GMS Serializer bundle, you can specify which root node you want to have in your XML output, in case you are using XML. So with annotations, you can configure on the class the value, the name of the root node when exporting your object to XML. So instead of having response as the root node, I want to have booking. So when I will serialize my object to XML, I will get a booking root node. Sometimes you want to, you would like to have XML attributes instead of having only root nodes, because by default, as I said, by default the serializer converts your PHP object to XML when you use XML, and in XML you will have only nodes. You won't have any attributes. So with this bundle, with the GMS Serializer bundle, you can ask for XML attributes. So there is an add XML attributes annotations that allows you to say, I want to have the reference property as an attribute of my main booking root node. So when I will serialize my booking object to XML, I will get the reference attribute on the booking root node instead of having a new node. We can also serialize an object to a single XML node. So this is an example. In my booking object, there's a price dependency, which is an object. So as you can see, it's a price object, and a price object contains three informations: the amount, the VAT, and the currency. And I want to convert this price object to a single node. So I need to have attributes and a value. So I'm using the @XML attributes annotation to convert the VAT and the currency information to attributes. And the amount will be the value of my price node. So when I will convert my booking object, it will also convert my price sub-object as an XML definition, and the price node will be a single price node. So with the VAT as an attribute and the currency as the attribute. So the serializer components always export all your properties in your object, but of course when you want to output, when you want to serialize your object, you don't want to serialize everything in your object because you have some sensitive information that you don't want to expose. So with this bundle, you are able to specify which property you want to export or which property you want to exclude from the serialization process. So there's a main tag which is @exclusion policy. You can specify on the class itself. So you want with this tag you want to exclude all properties except the reference tag which contains the reference property which contains the @expose tag, the @expose annotations. So I don't want to display the information of my object except for the reference. So when I will serialize my object to XML or JSON or YAML, I will only have my reference information. Or you can do the contrary. You can say, I want to expose everything except some information. So you have @exclude annotation. So I want to display everything of my booking object except for the price. So when I will convert my PHP object to XML or JSON or YAML, the price will be removed from the serialization output. You can also manage versioning, which is a quite interesting feature. Sometimes you add new informations to your objects, and you want to keep track of the versions of your API, for example. So let's say my booking object has a loyalty number property, which is available since version 1.8.4, for example. And as you can see, there's a annotation which is @serialized name, which means I want to convert this property, and I want the name of the name to be loyalty instead of loyalty number. So when I will serialize the object, it will be loyalty instead of loyalty number. So from version 1.8.4, I will have this property, but before, until version 1.8.3, I had membership number, but I changed the implementation. But in fact, this property contains two values, but I want to serialize to loyalty. So your serializer object has a setVersion method that takes the current version of your API. So I want to export my PHP object for version 1.8.2, for example. So the loyalty value will contain the old membership number. And if I want to version to 1.9, I will get the value of the loyalty number. So you can choose to export certain values depending on the version of your API. You can also offer several views of your serialized objects because depending on the context, you want to expose some values or other values depending on the context. So it's like validation constraints. For example, when you validate a form, when you validate your registration form, in registration you will validate the username and the password, but when you will edit your profile, you won't have to change your username. That's the same with this JMS Serializer bundle. You can specify which properties you want to expose for a specific context and which value you want to export for another context. So you can group the properties you want to expose. So with the @groups annotation, you can say, for example, on my booking objects, I want to have the ID property when I will get the list of my list of bookings. The reference will be displayed in both list and details, and the designation will only be displayed in the details. So when you serialize your object, you have to prepare your serializer object with a list of groups. So there's a setGroups method, and this setGroups method takes the groups you want to output. So all properties which are mapped with the details groups will be displayed. So in this case, I only have the reference and designation properties. I don't have the ID property. By default, this serializer object uses reflection to expose your information, to serialize your object. So maybe you would like to force the serializer object to call some getters and setters method. So there's an @accessType annotation which takes the public method value, and I want to tell that when I use this @accessType annotation, I want to tell the serializer to always call the setter and getter method on my booking object. So instead of using reflection to access the private property directly, it will call the getter method. So for example, when I will serialize the arrival property, I will want to have this arrival value to be formatted with month/day/year. And when I will recreate the PHP object from the XML string, I will ask the serializer to call the setArrival method, because by default it will introspect the object using reflection. So if I serialize the object, my arrival property is formatted with month/day/year. You can also map your property to other methods. So if you don't want to use getter and setter method, you can remap the method, the getter method and the setter method to call when exposing a property. So for example, my designation property will be displayed by using the getShortDesignation method and setShortDesignation method. So the serializer will not use the getDesignation method to output my designation property. It will call the getShortDesignation method. You can also customize the order in which you want to expose your properties. So by default, it just reads your objects from top to bottom. So it takes the properties from top to bottom and it serializes them in this order. But you can act on the order. So you have the @access order annotation you can put on your class, and this annotation takes two values. So you have alphabetical, so you want to order the properties by an alphabetical order, or you can use custom and you can decide your own order for serialization. So I want to first display the reference, then the arrival value, and then the departure value. So my output will be as follows. So it will also add the other properties if you don't specify all of them. So it will start with reference, arrival, and departure, and then it will serialize the other. If you want to unserialize your objects, and if you have nested objects, you have to tell the serializer how to unserialize, how to recreate the sub-objects. So for example, my booking object has a reference, which is a string. We have the arrival, which is a datetime object. So I want the serializer to recreate a datetime object. So with the add_type annotation, you will map the type of your properties. So when unserializing a booking object, I want to get a booking object that contains a datetime object for the arrival property, and I want to recreate a price object for the price property. And well, so as you can see, this bundles provides lots of interesting features because by default the component is not very usable. There's few features by default in the component. So when you use this bundle, you have lots of features provided, and you have the ND configuration with annotation. So if you have any questions, feel free. Thank you.